Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos Podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone, ZP002. Back with me on the show, my co-host, Jamie Franks. Jamie, as always, welcome to the show this fine Wednesday.
Thank you. Good to be here. Yeah, it is Wednesday, man. Yeah, I told myself all day long yesterday, no matter how many times people corrected me, even when I got home last night, it was like tattooed in my brain that yesterday was Wednesday. And I guess it's because we have a 4-day weekend coming up for Memorial Day. So like, I'm just trying to get there, but
well, it is definitely been a whirlwind of 5 days for me, between a same day fly down to Florida, same day fly in and fly out for a celebration of life for a friend that passed away, to 50th birthday party, to my father going into the hospital to have a nephrectomy, which is a kidney removal, to bringing my dog in this morning for a mast cell removal. It has been a week and we're only halfway through it. So I would appreciate a nice relaxing Thursday and Friday, which tomorrow it won't be. So hopefully Memorial Day weekend is a nice calm weekend with not a lot on the agenda.
Well, so where are you at with Memorial Day? Because I see it, and I guess I'll talk about it if you throw it back to me, but every year I see stuff on social media that like aggravates me about Memorial Day, like shaming people, like, if you're out having a good time and party and you're not remembering all the dead soldiers, and shame on you. Like, so where are you at with Memorial Day in general?
I mean, we go out and we enjoy the weekend and, honor the fallen by, I don't know. I'm that's where I am. I wish people happy Memorial Day weekend. Like I have, be safe. Enjoy time.
You can't say happy
family.
Memorial Day. It's not happy.
Yeah,
how dare you?
That's the internet, and the internet loves to fucking get mad about every little thing out there. Here's my impression of the next 4 years. Let's see. Donald Trump does something and the Democrats go, oh God, Donald Trump did this. And the Republicans say, well, you guys did this. And then the Democrats say, well, what if we said this? And the Republicans say, yeah, but you said this. It's fucking obnoxious. We live in a society where it's like middle schoolers. Like what was the issue now? Something happened where, the 86-47 seashell bullshit. Like everyone's like, oh God, that means he's going to take them 8 miles out and put them 6 feet under. And so the Republicans are all like, oh God, this is so bad. And then the Democrats are saying, oh, but you didn't have a problem when somebody was driving down the road and it had a tailgate with an image of Joe Biden bound and gagged in the back. And that's what it is. It's the Democrats do something that the Republicans did 4 years ago. And the Democrats lost their mind over, and now it's the same thing. The Democrats do something, the Republicans lose their mind over it. The Democrats say, well, look, you did this. You didn't have a problem with it when it was that. It's the most obnoxious thing ever. Well, like, how about all of you Democrats and Republicans put your fucking phones down and go to work? Get some shit done. Stop arguing like adolescent bitches and get shit done. How about that?
Well, yeah, we've gone down a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole, but yeah,
we have. Sorry.
That's all. I always say that, like, about all these people that go to these like rallies and protests and stuff. Like, I have never once been to a rally or a protest in my life. You know why? Because my ass had to go to work. But
right.
As I'm sure
about Memorial Day.
As I'm sure everybody can tell, I'm a big student and fan of comedy because I'm hilarious. But one of my favorite comedians is Dennis Leary, and like one of Dennis
He's
Leary's
great.
things he always said is like, it's obvious that most people have not been told to shut the fuck up enough.
Right.
Like he in one of his bits, he said he was gonna become a rich therapist because all he was going to do all day long every day is just tell every patient to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And they were all going to walk out of the office going, oh my God, I feel so much better. Nobody ever
Yeah.
told me to shut the fuck up before.
Or they haven't listened to his song, I'm an Asshole
Yeah,
enough.
hey, I got that in my iTunes playlist for real. Like no joke. But
Yeah.
on Memorial Day though, like, I kind of like what you said with the P320, like probably most people that are burning up the comment section of the SIG P320 probably don't have one. And most people that are yakking about how dare you say happy Memorial Day probably don't know anybody that was any service members that were, killed in the war or anything. I know several. I do think it's important to remember. I do think it is important to take time for remembrance. And I do think it's important to understand the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day and Armed Forces Day and all those, because invariably people mix them up. I see people like, reposting pictures of themselves in uniform on Memorial Day, and like Memorial Day is not for living veterans. It is for the ones that didn't make it home. As far as that goes, I like my ask of anybody would just be to understand that and just take a moment to remember. Anybody that follows my social media, there's a poem that was written by I think he was either Army or Marine Corps major. I should know that, and I don't. And I reposted every Memorial Day about remembering, the fallen. And I have been friends with several people that didn't make it back. There was a period of time when I was pretty sure that I was not going to make it back. And so I do think understanding what Memorial Day is about is important, and just taking a moment to remember is important. But then beyond that, I always say, party it up, go to the beach, have a barbecue with your family, and have a couple of beers, because the guys that didn't make it home, if they had, that's what they would want, and that's probably what they would be doing. They would not want everybody closing the curtains and hanging their head in darkness and being quietly,
Right.
solemn.
Here's the thing with Memorial Day, we'll wrap it up with this.
You're not the boss of me. Okay.
Memorial Day has been celebrated. I'm 50. We've celebrated that day as it's a holiday. It's considered a holiday.
Yeah.
We've called that day a holiday. We've celebrated that day as a holiday, and it's been done the same way up until a certain point when the internet decided to use it as an arguing point, right? Like it moved on in its timeline normally until one day somebody said, no, you can't say that on the internet, and then it became a battle every year on social media. Oh, and then you got these people that love to make you aware of what this weekend is about and what it's not about. And they want to you can't say it this way. And it's just like, I guess I'm just real tired of the internet a lot lately. Like, there's just everybody's got their opinion about something. And I say this as somebody who makes content on YouTube and gives my opinion about things, but I give it as my opinion, and I don't try and shove it down anybody's throat and tell them you need to think like this because I think like this. And I'll always be like that. You can form your own opinion. You and I had a very heated debate yesterday about suppressors and what I think about them and what you think about them, and that's okay. And I think at one point you said, well, what is the point you're trying to make? I said, I'm not actually trying to make a point, I'm making a statement. And that's a statement that I live on. Like, I'm never going to try and get you to think like I do about suppressors being dumb. They're just, to me, they're I'm going to say a novelty, but you don't need them. I'm not going to get you to think that. I want you to think how you think. And that's the problem with the internet today. If you share your opinion, everybody in the comments wants to tell you how you're wrong. And
well, the thing about the internet is that because of the internet and thanks to the internet, everybody is now an expert on everything, which if everybody's an expert, then nobody's an expert. And that's where we're living. So,
yeah. So,
but me personally, I keep all my opinions to myself. I don't ever give anybody my opinion about anything. So that's
never. No.
So,
Jamie, today we're going to talk about what your opinion is on the storage. Folks, that was 10 minutes of some opening banter that we wanted to get out there. So before we start the show today, I want to thank everybody for joining us. As usual, I always do. I let you know about when our show airs, which is on Thursdays, every Thursday on Spotify, Apple, through the Firearms Radio Network, and wherever else you pick up your podcasts. The video portion does go out on our YouTube channel, which is the ZERT Coffee and Chaos YouTube channel. And then our regular channel has all the other things that we put out, like the videos on the P320 and the upcoming video on putting together a tactical fanny pack. Yes, we're doing it. But as usual, today's show is sponsored by MedTac International, a place where you can get all of your medical gear, your medical items that you need for your IFAC, for your boo-boo kits, for your home kits, for your car kits. They carry everything from full blowout bags to, like I said, IFACs. They also carry stuff like armor plating, helmets, ballistic rated helmets, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And you can find them over at tactical-medicine.com. That is their website, in which we will always link here in the show description below. So for all of that information, head over there. Remember that ZERT members do get a discount. So if you're interested in getting a discount and you want to know more, you can head to the ZERT website, and all that information is listed there. So, all right. But today, what we've got for you is an informative show, I guess. It's not an opinion show. It's not a Stig did this and a Vet Bro did that, and then another channel commented on it. But they did. They were always doing something. Just a real aside from that. My amazing co-host here has had communication with Phil Strader, and we commented on that podcast last week on our last show. And very interesting back and forth. We are attempting to get Mr. Strader on this show to discuss the P320 and its lack of issues, but we don't know. Who knows? We'll see. So, but today we're going to talk about survival items that you should store, how you should store them, and how long they should be stored for. So I think that's a pretty good topic to dive into, because there's probably a lot of, I don't want to say misinformation out there, but maybe some confusing information when it comes to this. Would you agree?
Yeah, this kind of falls into the category of like people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And I don't think this will be a podcast of like great granular microscopic detail. I think this will be kind of a 10,000 foot view kind of thing, because we have talked about components of this in depth in other episodes, and we've discussed the potential faux pas of going back and covering some of those same topics again, because the podcast, I think, is starting to get a little more traction, and some of those were our earlier podcasts that maybe nobody listened to or nobody was around for, so maybe it might be worth to circle back around to those things again. But yeah, so we talk about survival and all the different aspects of survival, and shelter, water, fire, food, and beyond that, security and protection and comms plan and bug out plan and all that stuff. But if you're going to have all this stuff and supplies, you know, are you good to just buy a case of water and a case of MREs and throw it in the garage and have it sit there for 25 years? You know, that's
Right.
kind of what we're going to talk about today. So yeah.
Yeah. You know, and folks, we've always talked about how this starts, and it does start with your plan. If your plan is to shelter in place, then you can probably have pallets of canned goods and MREs, and you can go buy one of those industrial totes and fill it with all the water you want and pump out your own water if that's your plan. But remember, your plan is always as good until the first oh shit moment. And if your house catches on fire, well, your plan's shit. So what's your backup plan? You know, what is your alternative plan at that point? So remember, it starts and ends with your planning system. And you know, Paul has talked about it. I'm sure you talk about it. You know, PACE is a very good acronym to understand when it comes to planning. So
Primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. Yeah.
yeah. So those are your plans, right? So I guess the first question, and I'm gonna ask it to you like this, is what are the top 3 to 5 items that you store as a prepared individual?
Well, I would start by saying, because one of the earlier podcasts we did where we were talking about this kind of thing, I don't know, completely by chance or what, my next door neighbor, who I would assume is not in our demographic of our typical listener, somehow she came across one of our podcasts and listened to it, and she came over and was like, "Oh my God, you know, the podcast was great and it was very informative, but it made her feel like so overwhelmed because it made her feel like she was, you know, drastically underprepared." So, I mean, the first part of the answer to your question is like, you know, having anything is better than having nothing. Like if you can't afford it, or if you live in a small apartment, or if you live a lifestyle where you're constantly traveling, like just having something is better than just having nothing and being completely unprepared. But you said that what are the top 3 that I have?
Yeah.
Um well, food and water. I do have a deliberate storage plan of food and water. I have what I think is enough food for definitely me and my daughter, and like, you know, in my personal situation right now, my girlfriend lives like 50 miles away, so depending on the emergency situation or whatever that we're in, hopefully she can get here. But I think I have enough food to last 3 people for 3 weeks, and I think I have enough water to last 3 people. Sorry, correction. I know I have enough water to last 3 people for 3 weeks, and then more with rationing. You know, I'm sure we'll get into that. But and then I guess my third most stocked supply would be ammunition. I have enough ammunition to last a company of Marines in the field for 3 months. But yeah, I guess that would be my top 3 things. But this podcast, this episode isn't really about ammunition and stuff like that. But
Well, I mean, it is about stored items, and I
yeah.
think that's a good point to bring up. So let's start with food. When you talk about food, are you do you recommend people to do like the MREs, like the actual military ones that you can buy online? Do you go with the ReadyWise meals that we do have available over on the ZERT website, or the Mountain House, whichever you prefer? I mean, there's a couple of those different kind of dehydrated meals that are used for camping, but also used for this type of situation. Is that what you're referring to when it comes to storage?
Well, yeah.
Food?
So and there's a couple of like aspects to think about. One is expiration dates, and then within expiration dates, you have to think, what is the expiration date that some lawyer somewhere made somebody put on a product, and then when will the product actually expire? For example, like water. Now you buy a bottle of water, like a case of Evian water or whatever. It has an expiration date on it. Like, pure water does not ever expire ever. Like pure water will be good for as long as it's wet, but like what can happen is depending on what the container it's stored in, like, in that example, like the little 12-ounce or 16-ounce water bottles, over a long enough period of time. And then if they're exposed to sun or extreme heat or anything like that, the container that the water is in will start to degrade, but the water itself will never really go bad, even though it does have an expiration date on it. So as far as food goes, there's a few different veins and a few different schools of thought. You asked specifically about MREs. MREs are a good, for somebody that's just starting out, I would say that I would recommend that as a good starting point. Number one, because I would recommend, this may sound silly, but I would recommend like not buying them new. Because the military procurement, MREs are made for the military. They are available for civilians, but they are made for the military. They're supposed to be, battle rations or whatever, what they were called in the, in like World War II, Korea, and up through Vietnam. That's people, they were rations. We started calling them MREs sometime around Desert Storm is when I became aware of that term. But the military and any military procurement, and that's with anything that's consumable, like MREs or ammunition or anything like that, the military has a phased replacement plan. So an MRE, the shelf life of an MRE is it's 3 to 7 years is what they say. But the military procures so many MREs every year. And I think the phased replacement plan is I was about to say every 2 years. It might be every 3, that the military liquidates their entire inventory and then gets new. And then 3 years later, they liquidate their entire inventory and then get new. So if you're buying, I was about to say used MREs, they're not used, but they're just not new, pre-owned, you're buying pre-owned MREs. They probably still have another 4 to 5 years of shelf life left on them, even though they're not brand new. And MREs are good because they're, contrary to popular belief, they actually do taste pretty good. They're not dehydrated meals, which means you're not having to use any of your water storage to prepare the meal or rehydrate or anything like that. It doesn't have to be cooked. It doesn't have to be heated. You can. And then they come in. I mean, hell, I was about to say they come in many different flavors and stuff, but there's even like vegetarian MREs and stuff now. But within the MREs, I think when a lot of people think about survival food, you think about like sacks of beans and sacks of rice, and then that would be boring. Like Asian people's eyes look like this because they go, "Oh no, not rice again." No, kidding.
No, Jesus! Please don't cancel us, please.
But like eating rice and beans every day is going to get real old real fast if you were in a survival situation. But MREs, they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner entrees. They have vegetarian options. They've got and they actually taste pretty good, and they don't take water to cook or heat. You don't have to heat them. And even if you're buying the ones that the military already got rid of, they'll probably still going to last you for another, like I said, probably up to another 5 years after that. There's downsides to MREs. MREs are kind of bulky and kind of heavy. That being said, because I'm in the military, so when the military starts to get rid of MREs, it's very easy for me to scoop them up for free. Because they're getting rid of them anyway. So like I probably have, and it's just because I was able to get them for free. I probably have about 12 cases of MREs. But my preferred, and not to crap on the ones that you said you sell on the ZERT website. That's just that those aren't the ones I have. I have the ones from My Patriot Supply, and they come in these they're in these black airtight buckets, because anytime you're storing any kind of food item, everybody's probably heard this. Is probably not new information to anybody, but you want to keep it in a cool, dry, dark place, right? And so the bucket being black, that storing it in a dark place is good, but the container itself being dark, that keeps any light from getting in, because light can degrade the packaging. Light can degrade the taste and quality of the food, even if the food isn't technically expired. Exposure to light can degrade the flavor and all that stuff. But they come in these airtight black buckets that are sealed, and then within the black buckets, each item is vacuum sealed in these Mylar pouches. So
now those are the dehydrated ones, right? The Patriot Supply ones. They're like all the other ones, like the Mountain House, the Ready Wise. Like you have to add water to those, correct?
Yeah. But
Okay.
the reason I chose the My Patriot Supply is and I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but they advertise a shelf life of 25 years. So again, in my mind, that means a lawyer made them say that. So they're probably good for longer than that. And then with My Patriot Supply, I've always said like the two things that are going to get me in the apocalypse is that I take really long poops. I take a really long time in the bathroom, and
Please
I'm a
don't
picky
cancel
eater.
us.
What?
Please don't cancel us.
And so the My Patriot Supply, you can kind of tailor, you can custom tailor the meal selection that you're getting. And so when I've stocked up on the My Patriot Supply stuff, like I cherry picked the tailored meals that fit like my eating habits the best, and they're good for 25 years. And probably, maybe I should be ashamed to say this, but maybe it's a good example of what not to do. I haven't ever cracked one open and tasted it. I've heard that they are really good quality and taste really good, but I have not eaten anything out of the My Patriot Supply yet,
Well,
so I
I
can't
mean, you
testify to that.
probably should do that.
Yes, you're probably right. Yeah,
I think that's going to be your dinner tonight. But anyway, so
that will
there
be
are
my
a bunch of
homework.
different companies out there. My Patriot Supply is one of them. Obviously, we do sell ReadyWise meals on the ZERT website. They also come in a black bucket, and it is very easily stackable.
Yep.
That you can buy individual meals, and you can go and get a orange bucket at Home Depot, and you can seal those up whichever way you want. I mean, there is definitely a bunch of different ways to do it. If you are storing food and that is your food choice versus canning, again, it just, you've got to weigh which one makes more sense. I'd rather, if I had to bug out of my house, I'd rather take some of these than canned foods.
That's a good point.
You did bring up a good point about you don't have to burn your water source for the MREs and for canned stuff, I guess, but if you know what you're doing, and going and finding a water source and then boiling water is a way to not burn up your drinking water, but to still obviously purify water. All right.
Well,
So,
and if you're getting, one last thing about those little like types of meals, if that's gonna be like the main staple of your food storage survival plan, do be careful though. Like, just when I was looking stuff up, just so I was making sure I wasn't putting out bad information, looking at all the what I'll call the most popular brands, or the most common, I guess, brands of these types of foods. When you're looking for expiration dates, I found ones that ranged from 2 years to 30 years, like amongst the most common brands, like Mountain House, and what's the other one? The ones that you like find at Target and REI.
yeah.
No. There's Mountain House. I can't remember, but they're the ones that are at Walmart, Target, and like REI, the really common ones. They vary, like the expiration ranges from 2 to 30 years. And I even found some that didn't even have an expiration date. It just said good for quote unquote many years. And then I found some that claim that they're good forever. So I would be a little dubious of that, but just be aware of that for your food storage plan, if that's the direction you're going to go.
Yeah. And, also, I guess I would check to make sure that you're not, getting bad shit, right? They do have gluten-free. Some of these places have gluten-free. Again, this is well, I mean, it's a survival situation, right? So
and
when you go to Patriot Supply, or when you go to any of these places and they show this food in the dish, it looks like it was cooked by Gordon Ramsay. But let me tell you something, none of them taste great. I've made some of the ReadyWise meals, and they're okay. They do what they're supposed to do, right? I mean,
I agree.
You're not using these meals as like, you're not like, hey, wife and kids, what do you want for dinner tonight? I can make steaks, or we can open up a package of the chili mac and pour water in it and eat that. Like, you're not doing that. This
I
is
know a
the
guy, real quick. I know a guy that like anytime his kids got in trouble, that was their punishment. Was like
oh
while
God,
while everybody else was like eating pizza for dinner or whatever. Like if one
it's
of his kids
horrible.
was being punished, he would make them eat an MRE for dinner.
Oh
And he
God,
posted a video on Facebook one time of like his daughter had gotten in trouble for something, so her punishment was to eat an MRE for dinner, and she just had this like horrific look on her face with her little
right?
brown MRE
Yeah,
spoon with tears
yeah.
just streaming down her face, going, "Ah,
So bad.
like as she was eating." But MREs really aren't that bad. But kind of to your point, like a funny little saying we used to say is like if because sometimes you'll hear people like the term pogue gets thrown around a lot in military circles, and I guess for all intents and purposes, I guess I meet the definition of pogue because it's person other than grunt is what that stands for. So I'm not a grunt, I'm not an infantryman, so I guess I'm a pogue. But this is a kind of a pogue conversation, is people talking about what their favorite MRE is, and like when I was in Afghanistan, we would always say, like, if you have a favorite MRE, you've never had to eat them for long enough.
Right, right.
But and I think, like, to your point with those camping meals, that's the same thing. Like they taste okay and they'll get you by, and you hit the nail right on the head. Like they do, what did you say? They do what they're supposed to do, you
Right.
know.
That's it.
Uh,
So again, there are different options when it comes to food storage. If you are into canning and you want to do all of that, there's canning or there's buying canned foods, right? You can go and buy out all of the Chef Boyardee shit that comes in a can that you can coat open and eat cold if you want. I don't know what the storage life of those are, but that's another option if you want to do that. Remember, hold on before you jump in. Remember though, that stuff is going to add weight, and that is going to be a little bit more bulky than these. So just when you figure out what your plan is, if your plan is to bug out, you're not rolling around with a backpack of 50 grenades. I mean, 50 cans of, Campbell's soup.
well, that's my fourth biggest
Grenades.
survival item that I have stocked up is, well, not just grenades, bags of grenades.
Bags of grenades. Right.
Yeah. So sorry, I corrected you earlier. You said that when I was trying to think of the two most common meals, you said Ready Wise. And I was like, no, it is Ready Wise. The two real common ones that are everywhere are Mountain House and Ready Wise. Anyway, so
I knew that.
Most canned food that comes from like a grocery store is, I think, kind of the rule of thumb on that is it's good for a year. And I dated this girl one time. I probably have told this story before, but it's worth telling again. I dated this girl for a while that was a Mormon, of the Mormon faith. And one of the parts of the Mormon faith that I found really attractive and interesting, and I was like, why don't more churches wrap this into their value system or whatever? The Mormons are really big on like hammering people on preparedness. And when I say hammering people, like they when I would go to church with this girl I was dating, like they would advise that you have at least a 3-month supply of like emergency supplies, food, water, first aid kit, like all that kind of stuff. And then they would like a minimum of 6 months of like your salary, like in savings. And like they would straight call people out, be like, hey, Tom, last month we talked about this. You said you only had 2 months saved up. Like, what's the deal? Where are you at now? Like, and they would straight call you out on it. But she, in her house, and her like she lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. But her 2-bedroom apartment had like I call it a pantry. And in her pantry, I assume she bought it somewhere, but it was this. Do you know what like a lazy Susan is on the table, like that spins around? Yep. Hers was like a 5-tiered, like 6 foot tall, like lazy Susan that was in her pantry, and it was, in like quarters each. And so she would go to the store, and like one top to bottom, one of the 25% of the thing would be basically 3 months worth of canned goods, like, canned and jarred stuff. And like, like, so soup, canned vegetables, peanut butter, things like that. But that thing full was basically an entire year's supply of food, of canned goods and stuff in jars. And every 3 months she would eat one side of it, she would eat through that little quadrant, and then she would refill it and then spin it, and then eat the next one, like eat all the soup and
Wow.
eat all the veggies and all
Yeah.
that stuff, and then she would restock it and spin it. So the oldest thing on that wheel, so she had a year supply on hand, and the oldest thing on the wheel would be, basically 9
Yeah.
months old, and she was
Yeah.
constantly
And
rotating it. And that was really great and really smart. And I'm like, that's a really good way to do it. And it's one of those things where to do that might take you a little while to get started. But like once it's established, it's really easy to keep going. And then like that kind of, like, one of the other points I wrote down was, I think a lot of people, not all people, but a lot of people, I think, have like forgotten how to eat, because like recently in the news there was all this stuff about whether your EBT card should be, you should be able to buy soda and potato chips with your EBT card. Because like some people think that is how you eat, that like for dinner you just go down to the 7-Eleven and you get a couple of bags of chips and a soda, and like that's your dinner. And I do think a pretty significant portion of this country thinks that's how you eat, but it's not. You need to eat good, healthy, well
right. Yeah,
balanced
of
meals and
course.
stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if you
And
can, we're talking about like survival, and again, like I said earlier, I think the idea of survival food like conjures up certain images in people's heads. Either it's MREs or it's camping meals or it's a big sack of beans. But if you can just, when you do your regular grocery shopping, just do your regular grocery shopping with emergency preparedness somewhere in the back of your mind, and wrap that into your regular shopping, and then it makes it easier to do something like the girl that I just described had, where she had a year's supply of like kind of regular stuff, but that was her emergency supply of food.
right. And we're talking a lot about food because it is probably one of the more challenging things to do, right? Storing water is a little bit more, I guess, more streamlined. Like you said, pure
Well,
water doesn't, hold on, pure water doesn't expire, but
yeah.
you've got to worry about the containers that you are storing it in. Going back to food for a second, your storage or your food storage could start with everything that is in your basement. And
Mm-hmm.
if you've got a deep freezer in there and you have frozen food in there, that could be part of your plan. You just have to understand that if you need to bug out, that has to get eaten first. Like you just eat that, and you can have multiple levels of this. But
Yep.
again, we've spent the first portion of this about food because it is, I guess, the most in-depth piece of this when it comes to storage, right? How to store it, how much to store, understanding dates, understanding that you do need, you can't just get 3 cases of Frito-Lay's chips and you're going to survive on that. It's not going to work.
Well, and the other thing is, I do feel very confident in saying this kind of blanket statement. I do think we live in a time where most people, like the vast majority of people, have lost the ability to procure food on their own. Why can't I talk today? Like, meaning like, game
Yeah.
hunting and foraging
Hunting, right.
vegetables and growing vegetables and canning their own vegetables. Like, if most people, even if they did kill a deer, wouldn't know
No,
now,
right.
what do I do with it now? We do, unfortunately, we have our society has basically transitioned like almost completely over to like the understanding that food comes from a grocery store. Wherever it was before the grocery store, we have no idea or concept of that, but food comes from grocery store. And we've talked about this before too, like this is a widely proven statistic that in a major national level emergency, like that movie we talked about, Homestead, they say that within 72 hours of a big major national level emergency, every grocery store is going to be empty, because grocery stores operate on a 3-day resupply system. And so
Right.
if that system breaks down, if that chain breaks down, that grocery store is going to be completely empty in 3 days. And so like I think the average person could find a water source and probably could purify water, that they found in a stream or in a lake or whatever,
Yeah.
with fair competency. But I do not believe your average American could go out and find food. So food storage, I think, right or wrong, that's going to be the more difficult part, and the part that I think should be better planned for. I mean, that being said, we've also talked about before, like you can go. It's not going to be enjoyable, but you can go 3 weeks without eating.
Right.
You need water. You'll die from thirst in 3 days, but you can go 3 weeks without eating. But.
Yeah. So, all right. So then let's talk about water storage. You mentioned a case of water, and you can pick those up relatively cheap. What's good about those is you can keep a case in your car. You got to be careful about that when it comes to temperature, right? Like you said, storing that in the summer, you're going to deal with that plastic kind of breaking down. Storing it in the winter, you've got bottles of ice that will form if you live in obviously the area where you get cold temperatures. I've got two, they look like the old Jeep gas cans.
Yeah, jerry cans.
Exactly, but they're a lot larger, and they're for water. Now, again, they're still made of a plastic, but you're talking, it's not the plastic bottles that water goes in, so it's designed for water storage. So, how much water do you recommend to someone?
Well, so water bottle, if you're going to have water stored like in water bottles, like the example I gave earlier was like, Evian water bottles. And the reason I gave that example is because I think Evian is everywhere. Like we have brands out here that you probably don't have in New Hampshire, but
I'm in Connecticut.
Or sorry, Connecticut, right? But if you're going to store water, it needs to be like 75 degrees or cooler. So like definitely be careful about what you store in your car. If you are storing water, it needs to, like Chris said, with the plastic jerry cans or whatever, whatever you're going to store water in, make sure it's in a food grade container. Like make sure it says the words food grade on it. But how much water, the general rule of thumb that you're going to hear and find, the statistic, or I guess that's the rule you're going to find everywhere, is everybody's going to say 1 gallon of water per person per day. And to me, that's a good rule of thumb, like for camping. And when you're camping, you're not really concerned about conservation, because in camping, you're cooking, you're washing dishes, you're washing your hands, you're washing your face, you're washing, you're doing a washing your shirt in your little thing in your bin or whatever. So like when I'm camping, I know, like, unless I'm doing like long range desert camping where it's going to be a long periods between water resupplies, I'm not really conserving water when I'm camping. And 1 gallon per person per day is definitely enough to get me by when I'm not even trying to conserve. So if you use the rule of thumb of 1 gallon per person per day for like emergency preparedness, that will definitely be enough to get you by. But now, like, how much do I recommend? The thing I would recommend doing, and the best water storage that I'd normally recommend to people, is, especially if you're a homeowner, at some point during your journey of home ownership, you're probably going to have to replace your water heater. And my advice is always, when you replace your water heater, replace it with the absolute biggest one that will fit in the space wherever your water heater is. Because for me, I do have a little bit of like deliberate emergency water storage. I have probably the same ones you have. They're 6.5 gallon, like jerry can food grade plastic containers. I have 4 of those. And then because I teach classes, shooting classes, I always bring like a flat of water to my classes. So I always have several of those just stacked up in my garage that I rotate through, that I could use in an emergency. But my biggest water storage asset is my 85 gallon water heater that constantly refills itself with fresh water every day as I use it, as I shower and as I do laundry and run my dishwasher. My water heater is constantly refilling itself. So in an emergency, that right there is 85 days I'm sorry, 85 gallons of water
Right.
that's going to last 2 people, 2 months probably.
Right.
And that's, and then
Now,
with rationing, I could, you could probably make that 85 gallons of water last 3 months. But
now, when it comes to accessing that water, do you have a plan in place for that? Do you recommend a plan for accessing that water for somebody? I mean, do you have a setup that you
my water heater has a spigot on the bottom of it that's for draining the water heater. So in an emergency, like I think we've referenced it before, back in 2010 or 2011, it had to have been. We had this big blackout in the southwestern part of the United States. It was the blackout went basically from Los Angeles south and from Phoenix, Arizona west. So that whole corner of the country, we had a big, huge blackout. And one of the first things, like within the first 12 hours, that they were putting out over the radio was that due to the blackout and the water treatment plants had, suddenly lost power with no warning, so they weren't able to close some valves or put something in place. And so they said that like the city water had been contaminated. And so they were advising people like, for the next 24 hours, whatever water, because you could still turn on your sink and water would come out. But they were telling people to boil it. But in a situation like that, I would go down there and close the valve to my water heater and basically shut it down. And whatever water is in there is I think is safe to assume is safe to drink. And then mine has a little spigot on the bottom of it that I can just turn on and drain the water.
But that's where I'm going with it. So obviously yours is I'm assuming yours is on the ground with some kind of little basin around it that does not matter because the amount of water that goes in there is definitely going to go outside that. So do you have some kind of,
mine's on like a pedestal that's about 18 inches off the floor.
Okay. So you can get something. So mine is directly on the floor. So there definitely needs to be some kind of plan. So for all of you that are out there that are listening to this, that are now going to implement this and go look at your water heater, understand where it sits, how you can get that water out, should you need to get that water out.
And a lot of people are going to a tankless water heater for the convenience factor. And that is fine. You can go to a tankless water heater and still retain the water heater as well. Like, a lot of people will go to a tankless water heater and they'll completely remove their traditional water heater. But if you are a survival preparedness minded person, I would just recommend that you don't do that because that's
So the one that I have, and you were talking about, I do bring one camping. It's a 3.5 gallon jerry can with a spigot on the bottom where you can just press the little lever down and you get a glass of water should you need to. And like you said, we fill that up with 3.5 gallons of water and do not run out by the time the 2-day camping trip is over, with washing dishes and using that water to make coffee. So there are obviously it's plenty of water. Now the ones that I have for a survival situation are 5 gallons, and all of these are the food grade material, and they're 5 gallons. And they're obviously that much bigger and that much bulkier. 5 gallons of water, if I remember correctly, a gallon of water I think weighs like 8 pounds, somewhere around there. So understand what we're talking about here. If you got 5 gallons of water, 8 times 8, that's 40 gallons, or that's 40 pounds per, and you've got 2 of them. How are you bringing that? How are you transporting that should you need to? So all of this requires you to look a little bit further.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the ones I have, and again, you can find these at, I think you can kind of find them anywhere, like at Tractor Supply and REI and maybe not Target and Walmart, but like farm stores and camping stores. It's called an aquatainer, like aqua, AQUA tainer, TAINER. And earlier I said it was 6.5 gallons. It's actually 7 gallons, and it had like the cap like turns into a spigot. And that's what I have, and it's 7 gallons. But like you said, I think a gallon of water, you're right. I mean, it's 8 pounds. I think it's like 8.3, whatever. But yeah,
8.34.
5 gallons of water is 40 pounds. And so 7 gallons of water that's 56 pounds per. But um, I have 4 of those, the Aquatainers. And then I should know this off the top of my head, but I don't. Water storage stabilizer. Because I think
Oh yeah,
I put the stabilizer stuff in it too.
Yep. And those are great. And those, those tabs are good to put in the water that you're storing.
Yep.
It's good to, I think they're the iodine tablets, right? They're good to keep with you in your go bag, in your camping bag, whatever. I mean, just to have. We've talked about life straws in the past. We've talked about the Catadine bags for water filtration, but having the tablets as well.
Life straws are legit, by the way.
Yes. So food and water, there's the two. The other thing that we kind of talked about in the past is gas, having some kind of gas storage. Now, you and I talked about this in a more recent episode when it comes to a survival plan, right? Everybody's plan maybe to get in their vehicle. And I definitely don't come home every day with a full tank of gas, but I never let my truck go under a quarter tank of gas. And I know that a quarter tank of gas gets me 100 miles. So even in my worst situation, I know I can get 100 miles on what I have in my vehicle all the time.
Yep.
And that usually is more depending on where I am in gas. Now, what do you store for gas, or what do you recommend storing for gas? And gas is going to be a little bit more of a challenge because you can only store that so long.
So this kind of goes hand in hand with what I was talking about earlier with, like, if you do your regular grocery shopping with emergency preparedness in mind, it makes everything a lot easier. And this isn't even like end of the world apocalypse kind of stuff. This is just kind of a good idea, especially if you have a garage. If you live in an apartment or something like that, like, storing gasoline is going to be a little bit tricky. I don't know if people like fully understand the difference between like flammable and explosive and combustible and stuff like that, but gasoline is an explosive. Gasoline is not flammable. It's an explosive. Or no, it's combustible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I just messed it up. Yeah, it is
the liquid.
Yeah, it's combustible because you could light a match and throw it into a cup of gasoline and it'll just go out.
Right.
So gasoline is combustible. But you may live in a situation where storing gasoline can become kind of tricky. And then depending on what kind of car you drive, if you drive a car that's like completely closed, like an SUV or something like that, having a can of gasoline in the back, again, that's very, very questionable and maybe not advisable. But if you live in a situation where you have a garage, I have this little rack, and I'd have to go down there and look at it. It's Expedition Essentials or Adventure Essentials or something like that. But it's this little rack that holds 4 20-liter jerry cans, and a 20-liter jerry can, 20 liters is 5 point something gallons.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like 5.75 gallons or something like that. Somebody can correct me on that in the comments. But this little rack, it's this little aluminum rack. It holds 4 jerry cans. And so I always have those 4 jerry cans full of gas. And if you fill them, again, this is a little bit of a bridge for some people, but if you keep them full with the highest octane gas that you can get in your area, higher octane gas is just more refined, and it has less. It's just like a more pure form of gasoline. That's why the octane is higher. And if you look at it like in a jar, higher octane gas is a lighter color. Again, just because it's been through a further refinement process. So gasoline does eventually expire. Gasoline does become unstable and go bad. And then if it gets moisture in it, that's a whole other thing. So if you're storing gasoline, like, I would recommend um, 2 jerry cans, I think that's like enough to fill my car up. So like twice a year, I will just purposely let my car like basically get down to empty, and then I'll take 2 of those jerry cans out and dump them into my car, and then put the jerry cans in the back of my Tacoma, go up to the gas station and refill them. And that's like and you know what? Like, oh, I forgot to do it this year. No big deal. Like gasoline, it takes a long time for gas to degrade and become unstable.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's, it doesn't expire in a year. You like if probably for 3 years you'd be okay, but like it's literally one of those things where you can be like, oh, I forgot to do that this year, and just go do it, and it's still going to be fine. And it's an easy thing to just kind of work into your normal routine. And like I said, it's not even an end of the world apocalypse thing. This can be a snowstorm thing, or if you live in a part of the
Right.
country where there's hurricanes or floods, or like it is, I would say it's a generally good idea for most people to have gasoline on hand, because like you said, on a quarter tank of gas, that'll get you 100 miles. So like that, it's a very important thing to have, but I understand that some people's living situations aren't compatible with storing large quantities of gasoline. But.
True. I mean, whatever gas costs right now, I mean, you're anywhere between $3 and $6 wherever depending on where you live in the country, and you know, but going back to having just a little bit versus nothing,
Yep,
is still a better option. If you live with that same idea of, I'm not going to let my car get under a quarter of a tank. Now, I drive a Ram 1500. That's why I get 100 miles on a quarter of a tank. Somebody who drives like a smaller car, a 6-cylinder with a quarter of a tank, you may get 200 miles on a quarter of a tank, depending on, your gas mileage. I mean, my average is 17 miles per gallon. If you're getting 25 miles per gallon and you've got a quarter of a tank, you're going to get a little bit farther. Now, granted, I've got a 22 gallon or 23 gallon gas tank where it may be smaller, but it's all relative. So figure out what your baseline is, right? So don't let your vehicle go under a quarter of a tank. Know how many miles that gets you, and then build off of there. If you need 2 gas cans filled and they're both 5 gallons, that gives you 10. I mean, some gas tanks are only 15 gallons. So
yeah,
10 gallons is going to get you almost, 3/4 of the way there. So
yeah. And in my car, I drive a lesbian limousine, the Subaru Outback.
Whoa.
Love it, by the way. But
Please don't
I
cancel
can
this.
I can drive. I live in San Diego. I can drive from San Diego to Las Vegas and about a third of the way back on 1 tank of gas. So like Chris is saying, like figure that out and know that, and 100%, a little bit is better than not having anything. And one gas can of 5 gallons of gas in probably most modern cars is going to get you a fairly far distance by today's standards.
Now, for all of you EV people out there, y'all are fucked. So, I mean, you're not storing anything. I don't care what kind of battery phone bank you're buying on Amazon these days. You don't have anything that's going to help you out. So good luck with that. Now,
anybody that has a dual sport bike is going to be giving the finger to everybody as they drive past.
Exactly. Yeah. Paul talks about his dual sport all the time. And those motorcycles get a lot farther on a lot less. So something to think about if your plan.
I get 150 miles to the gallon on this hog. Still want to go to Aspen.
If your plan requires you to be, solo or an individual, then look at that.
Yeah.
Food, water, gas, those are some things to really consider. We can go a little bit further, but we're not going to go too much further. We've talked about ammo storage before. Everybody can sit there and, as the kids say, have that flex of, I've got 10,000 rounds of this and that and this, and that's great and all, but try moving that. Yeah, you're not carrying that. I mean, I had to put 10,000 rounds of 9mm in the back of my 1500 truck, and it hated it. So think about that, right? Plan accordingly when it comes to ammo storage. Sure.
Well, think about how much you're going to hate it when I shoot you 15,000 times.
Exactly. You can have a lot of it, or you can have enough that makes sense. So be smart. When it comes to medical items, that's another thing you should really think
Oh, yeah.
about,
Yeah.
you know.
I talk
But
about that all the time.
but having medical items stored is great, but medical items do have medicine has an expiration date. And you've got to be cognizant of that. And you've got to be cognizant of what happens when you take medication that has expired. The efficacy can go up, it can go down, but understand all of that. Again, we give you guys enough information to be somewhat dangerous. We require you to go out there and do the rest of your research to what makes sense for your situation.
Yeah, like I've said it a million times. It's worth saying again. Like that is such a hard pill for some people to swallow. As you know, you brought up the med kits at the top of the show. That's such a hard pill to swallow. Is that you may buy this badass first aid kit or medical kit, and you put it in your car, or you put it in your backpack, or you mount it to the wall in your house, whatever, and you never touch it.
Right.
There will come a time where you have to spend that money again and replace that stuff that's in there, even though you because like I said, at least the food you can kind of eat through it and rotate through it and actually, get use out of it. But first aid kit, you can never touch it ever, and you're eventually going to have to replace everything in it anyway. So that is a hard pill for some people to swallow, but it's a pill that you need to swallow. But where are you at on keeping stuff for trading? Like I see that on that what was that show called? The Preppers.
Oh yeah. I
Doomsday
mean, it's
Preppers. Like
good.
people
Yeah.
stock like bottles of vodka and cans of coffee, like to use for trading in the apocalypse.
Yeah. I mean, great. You've got 10,000 rounds of ammo. Understand what you need, and you can maybe trade the rest, barter the rest. I mean, I think that's a great that could be a great second part to this, because sure, what are some of the things that people are going to want to barter with? Well, it's really dependent on what they don't have, and if you had somebody that didn't plan accordingly with medical, and you've got, you know, penicillin, or,
Batteries.
well, did you say batteries?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, batteries, not medical gear, but yes, batteries. Like if you've got stuff like that, then you've got a bartering tool. Now,
Yep.
with that, understand that if somebody doesn't have anything to barter and they've got more ammunition than you, they may try and take it with force. So this is all part of your plan, which needs to be at the top of all of this and understand what that is. So just, I guess that's where I sit when it comes to barter,
And like a lot of other things, like KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I learned a lot of like valuable lessons from the Taliban in Afghanistan. Simple works. We would go into these places. We would like go into these compounds, or we would find these weapon caches. We would find food caches. Do you say cache or cache? We always just said cache. But
Yeah, I've always said cash. I mean, I say a little bit of both, but yeah, I mean, most times it's just cash.
okay, yeah. So we would find caches of ammunition, weapons, food, everything, and like simple works. Like as long as you like for food, like if you're storing like dry food, I said, beans and rice, it's going to suck
Yeah,
to eat it for a long period of time, but it will work. It will keep you alive. If you're storing dry food and you just keep it off the floor, keep it away from like mold, and keep
right.
it away from pests. That's another, we didn't really talk about that, but keeping your storage pest proof,
Yeah,
making sure that like rat, because like if you have a 50-pound sack of rice, like the conventional wisdom says that if you find the smallest little mouse hole or rat hole in a 50-pound sack of rice, you have to throw it all away.
yeah,
But the Taliban in Afghanistan, we would go into their compounds, and they would have like massive caches of food and stuff, and it was up off the ground in a cool, dark place. And they were surviving off of it. Ammunition,
yeah,
they were keeping their ammunition. It was funny because we raided one, because I was in southern Afghanistan, which is very, very hot in the summer, but very, very cold in the winter.
right.
And all their Russian surplus ammunition that was 30 years old was all in wooden crates. Well, they took it all out of the wooden crates and burned the wood to stay warm. but like all the ammunition was up on these like metal like little racks, like just piled up. And guess what?
Yeah.
It all still worked pretty good. Like, so
Yeah.
simple can work. Simple is effective. You don't have to spend a ton of money. Keep it simple and figure out what works.
Yeah. But guys, listen, like I said just a few minutes ago, we give you enough to be dangerous here. We share our thoughts on this, and we do a fair amount of research, but we want to always leave you with the questions of, what is your current storage plan, or whatever the topic is. But today is this: what is your current storage plan for food, water, medical gear, gas, ammunition? What did you find useful from this show? Let us know in the comments. Obviously, we always ask for that, and we appreciate when we do get that feedback. But always end the show with thanking you for spending some time with us, and I always turn it over to Jamie for some final thoughts. So Jamie, what do you got on the final thoughts for survival storage?
My homework is definitely gonna be to crack open the My Patriot supply and eat some of it and see how it tastes, since I have not done that. But my final thought on this is, just like what I've said about ammunition, like, don't wait until the day comes when you need it to try to find it. When COVID happened and like all the COVID lockdowns started, and nobody, like, obviously we can look back on that now through hindsight, but when it first started, I don't think anybody really knew what direction it was going to go. And ammunition all around the country, like, flew off shelves. Like I've said many times, people were calling me to borrow guns and ammo, and I was like, "No, dog."
Yeah.
But just because I was curious, I already had mine, but just because I was curious during, like, right kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, I went to the My Patriot Supply website, and everything was sold out. And it was like estimated back in stock time, I think, was like, it said like estimated restock was 7 to 12 weeks. So if you wait until, don't wait until you need it. Like, right now is actually a pretty good time. Like, everything is pretty good right now. And now is a great time to get started if you hadn't. Don't wait until the next COVID type thing happens, and then you're scrambling to try to get it. And now every website, every store, every place is sold out for the next 3 months. Like, don't be the person that's scrambling. That's all I got.
Very true. Isn't there something else?
Well, yeah. And, of course, that would lead one to the conclusion that it's easy to be hard, it's hard to be smart. So the smart thing to do would be to get all that stuff now before you need it. But.
All right, guys. Well, until next time, you stay safe, you stay prepared, and we'll talk to you guys soon. ZP002.